Government St. Martin, we take good governance serious. If any of you in here Google the word board, managing, and add any government-owned company for the last decade or more, I'm pretty sure you'll see why good governance is important. Not only for government-owned entities, but also foundations and private companies. The government of St. Martin thinks that good governance is so important that we also started a traineeship program in collaboration with the Timmins Institute. We started this program last year for 15 trainees. We're already in our 5th month, I believe. We have a class today. I also take part in this class, actually. We had a high demand of young professionals that applied. And what we thought was important was to have young professionals be able to understand the importance of good governance, understand the management of companies at a young age so that we prepare future board members that are well prepared to be on entities and also foundations and so forth going forward. Good corporate governance is essential for the long-term success of any organization. It ensures that a company is run in a responsible and ethical manner with the best interests of stakeholders in mind. Effective good corporate governance includes clear lines of communication and accountability between the board of directors, management, and shareholders. It also involves transparent reporting of financial information and adherence to laws and regulations. One of the key aspects of good corporate governance is the independence of board members, of directors. Independent directors bring a fresh perspective and are not beholden to management of any particular group of shareholders. This helps promote objectivity and fairness in decision making. Another important aspect of good corporate governance is the protection of the minority. The protection of the minority means the rights and interests of all shareholders are respected and taken into an account, not just those of the majority. In conclusion, good corporate governance is essential for the long-term health and success of any organization. It promotes responsible and ethical behavior, transparency, and fairness in decision-making. Let us all strive to improve good corporate governance in our organizations and in society as a whole. I saw I give Obrecht a little nod for the second part of my presentation. And what I like is my main part of my presentation. So I go by the Minister of Finance, and over the last few years, I also added an I to my portfolio, which I consider innovation. And with the recent innovation in artificial intelligence, the speech I just read just now was not written by me, but was written fully by artificial intelligence. And I decided to have another aspect of good corporate governance about the future and how we look at good corporate governance and artificial intelligence. I'll wait a couple of seconds. So we have, the last few years, we have a few companies, OpenAI, ChatGPT, even Canva now also has an addition of artificial intelligence included in their systems, where they basically have scanned the internet for the last 10, 15 years and have a database accessible to it. ChatGPT 3.5 now has human interaction in it, where they have learned from humans what is good, approved to some more like humans. And this is an example of what I did a few days ago in regards to the presentation I just said. So I basically told ChatGPT to write a speech, a short speech actually. First I had a long speech, but then I put short speech. So initially it was about 5 to 6 pages, and then it went to 3. And with a matter of 10 to 15 seconds, the speech was ready. That's the power of artificial intelligence in 2022. This will just increase over 2023, sorry, but this came out in 2022. That's the power of artificial intelligence today. So what does this do? This puts a lot of potential jobs at risk in the future, but it also poses a few other risks. So I call this, I tell my friends, this is my new friend, OpenAI. So I also asked OpenAI a few other questions. I said, you know what? Instead of having to do a long research on Google, also tell me what are the risks of having you in our corporate governance system. And my friend said that the use of artificial intelligence in corporate governance can introduce a number of risks, including lack of transparency and accountability, because the AI systems can be difficult to understand and interpret, making it difficult for stakeholders to assess the decision-making processes and outcomes. He also said, or she also said, or it also said, whatever you want to be referred to, bias in decision-making, AI systems can perpetuate and even amplify existing biases in data, leading into discrimination outcomes. Cybersecurity, as we all know, job displacement, and the automation of certain tasks and decision-making processes can lead to job losses and other economic impacts. How do we mitigate these risks? To mitigate these risks, it's important for organizations to have a strong governance practices in place, such as regular audits and evaluations of artificial intelligence systems, clear policies and procedures for decision-making and accountability, and ongoing monitoring and reporting of the performance of the impact of AI. So this was a short presentation I decided to put in place today because I believe that in our history of living, technology has not gone backwards. I don't believe you've ever seen technology gone backwards in our history. So it will just continue to exponentially grow. And I believe we should be prepared for this. When it comes to good governance, also. And I look forward to the rest of the panels, the keynote speakers, and the workshops today. And then I hope that in the future, we also take into consideration the power of the internet, but more specifically, the power of artificial intelligence when it comes to good corporate governance in all of our organizations. Thank you.
Imagine, if you will, a country government where there are no systems of regulations, practices, or processes by which we are guided. We would be in complete chaos. These instruments by which our organization and its leaders and management ensure accountability, fairness, and transparency in our relationships with stakeholders and the broader community are the basis for law, order, and safety. It reflects the image of the country. It reflects the image of our people. After the passing of the hurricanes Irma and Maria, the Dutch government made some funds available to St. Martin via the St. Martin Recovery, Reconstruction, and Resilience Trust Fund. As a result thereof, the National Recovery and Resiliency Plan, NRRP, was drafted and approved by the Council of Ministers with the intention to highlight key projects that would help to not only recover a country's assets, but also improve the resilience of our institutions and infrastructure. Key elements of corporate governance include the selection and oversight of top management, the establishment of strategic goals and policies, the monitoring of performance, and the protection of shareholder rights. Effective corporate governance within the government's own administration can help promote efficiency, stability, and long-term success for the country's own operations. The Airport Terminal Reconstruction Project is the pilot project used to lay the groundwork for St. Martin Corporate Governance Improvement Plan. In early 2019, on the request of the Council of Ministers, a corporate governance task force was installed, with 3 of the 4 members participating in this good governance workshop, namely Mr. Miguel Alexander, Mr. Frank Kunneman, Dr. Frank Kunneman, Mrs. Joan de Valle-Meid, and Mr. Roland van den Berg. Those were the 4 task force members. Once the Council of Ministers approved the Corporate Governance Improvement Plan, the next step was the implementation thereof. And who best to implement that plan that they were so key in providing than those drafters? Via a different directly financed subsidy from the Ministry of BZK, also known as the B15 country package, the Corporate Governance Task Force transitioned into the Corporate Governance Implementation Team, which we fondly call the I-Team. The B15 country package, which was monitored by our Secretary General of the Council of Ministers, along with a small key staff, launched on December 9th, 2021, with the key focus areas: corporate governance improvement at PGIA companies, drafting of an amendment to the National Ordinance Corporate Governance, drafting of a new corporate governance code, framework for the Corporate Governance Authority, which is then to be the successor of Corporate Governance Council as we know it today, and lastly, to support the Council of Ministers in the corporate governance improvement in general. In addition to the B50 country package, the Council of Ministers also approved another measure aimed at surveying the effectiveness and efficiency of 5 government-owned companies and entities under the B2 measure, of which the first 2 phases were concluded August 16th and December 14th of 2022, respectively. These companies and entities were the Postal Services of St. Martin, St. Martin Laboratory Services, NV, NVGEBE, BTP, and SMHDF. Corporate governance is setting the basis for governmental operations for several reasons. It helps in preventing fraudulent practices, mismanagement of both funds and people, and other forms of lawlessness that could harm the public or the economy. The companies and subcontractors who the government align itself with must have the traits of transparency. Otherwise it reflects negatively, not just on government, not just on those companies, but negatively on how we operate as a country, and as a country that is still in the growing pains of development. To further improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the companies, entities, and government, as a shareholder and/or policy maker in this regard, the government of St. Martin is working on a more targeted and comprehensive approach in line with the activities of both country package to make the impact more targeted as we work to improve corporate governance here on St. Martin. Governments that have strong corporate governance practices are more likely to be financially stable and efficient, which can contribute to a healthy economy, as well as a good quality of life for all our people. This is important as it helps to promote public confidence in the financial markets, which is essential for a country's smooth functioning. Furthermore, the government has an interest in corporate governance because it can help to prevent companies from engaging in illegal or unethical practices such as bribery, money laundering, or environmental pollution. This can help to protect the public and maintain the integrity of our legal system as well. How can misconduct harm the economy? Misconduct and fraud can lead to an erosion of investor confidence in the financial markets, making it more difficult for companies to raise capital and for investors to make informed decisions. This can lead to market instability, slow economic growth, and in turn to financial hardship for individuals and businesses, which can further impede economic growth, and then the cycle continues. This instability can lead to an uneven playing field for companies, with fraudsters gaining an unfair advantage over honest businesses, reducing competition and leading to higher prices for consumers. Mismanagement can damage the loss of reputation of a company, a sector, or, in a worst case scenario, an entire country, and can discourage investment and trade and usher in a reduction of gross domestic product, GDP, as well. We must know that a reduced GDP means the loss of jobs and decreases in the standard of living for the individuals, the people we hold most dear in our community. Combating artifice in the corporate space and promoting transparency and accountability are therefore essential for maintaining a stable and healthy economy. What has corporate governance done in the past? Corporate governance has evolved over time, and the practices and mechanisms that are used to promote accountability and transparency have changed in response to a variety of factors such as economic conditions, technological advances, as was mentioned by my colleague, and regulatory changes. In the past, corporate governance was focused on protecting shareholders' interests, and the board of directors' role was to ensure that the company's management acted in the best interests of the shareholders. This often led to a separation of ownership and control, with shareholders having little influence over the company's operations. In recent years, however, the focus of corporate governance has shifted the mindset of government to include a broader range of stakeholders, such as the civil servants and the broader community, as well as the workers of said companies. Government is now expected to consider the impact of our actions on all stakeholders while executing our shareholder right, and to balance the interest of the diverse groups. Corporate governance has also been affected by several high-profile corporate challenges in the past, and we can name just recently NVGEB locally, and internationally companies such as Enron and WorldCom, which led to increased regulatory oversight of companies. This has helped to improve transparency and accountability, and to prevent similar scandals from occurring in the future. These changes made corporate governance more complex. That too, we must admit. And sometimes we want to move away from complexity. And governments have also had to adapt to meet the changing needs of our society. Next, I will look at corporate governance and society. Good corporate governance works hand in hand to promote socially responsible behavior by the government and can encourage all of us to consider the impact of our actions individually and collectively on the community and the society at large. As such, the government of St. Martin supports the measures, as we've agreed to in the country packages, to improve the current situation of government-owned companies and entities. This sets the framework to ensure that the government acts in a responsible manner by implementing sustainable and fair practices. It can also set the framework to ensure that employees, in this case, civil servants for us, and government-owned company workers are treated fairly and ethically by implementing policies that promote diversity, inclusion, and fair compensation. For example, our recent actions within the Ministry of General Affairs to execute employee satisfaction surveys has the goal of garnering the necessary information from our civil service, from our boots on the ground, to be better able to address their needs and our needs within the organization based on hard facts and data. Corporate governance can also play a role in promoting social and economic development by encouraging companies to also invest in communities and to promote social and economic inclusion. This can help to create jobs and improve the standard of living for individuals and communities. When corporate governance is weak or not properly implemented, it can also negatively impact society. For example, companies can engage in unethical and illegal practices that can harm the environment, that can exploit their own workers, and ultimately deceive consumers, which can also lead to higher cost of living, prices, etc., and negatively impact society at large. Therefore, it is important for government to have a functional corporate governance system in place that not only promotes the interest of the companies and the shareholder, but keeps the interest of the people, the workers, as well as those we serve, at the forefront as our highest priority. How can governments improve corporate governance? Governments can take the necessary steps, as we are, to improve corporate governance in their countries, such as establishing and enforcing laws and regulations that promote transparency, accountability, and responsible behavior within our organizations, as well as within government-owned companies and entities. This includes laws that require companies to disclose financial information, that prohibit fraud and insider trading, and laws that protect the rights of shareholders and other key stakeholders, including consumers. We can also encourage companies to adopt codes of conduct and best practices and highlight companies, so put them in a light and ensure that they are rewarded somehow, that meet certain standards of corporate governance. This goes hand in hand with enhancing oversight and enforcement of laws and regulations, such as establishing government agencies or regulatory bodies to monitor and enforce compliance and providing resources for enforcement efforts. A key point I believe that as government and society we have to do is mindset changing. The mindset of the person has to be such that they can acknowledge what levels of integrity are being breached in order to address them and not feel that the rules and regulations are punishing them unnecessarily. So mindset change is also key for us to be able to acknowledge when and where corporate governance needs to be improved and to take the necessary steps to do so. We as government can also encourage companies to engage in responsible business practices that benefit society by promoting corporate social responsibility. That word is being bandied about a lot right now, but it needs to be well defined and the activities coming out of that clearly and transparently communicated to the community. And that will then, of course, bring corporate sustainability. That is what we indeed need. We can also enhance stakeholder participation in corporate decision-making. This can include providing for greater representation of stakeholders on boards of directors and in other corporate governance structures, and encouraging companies to engage with stakeholders through processes such as Sustainable Development Goals or the United Global Compact, UNGC. By implementing these and other measures, governments can help to promote transparency, accountability, and responsible behavior by ourselves, our companies, and all those that we do business with, which can contribute to a stable, efficient, and sustainable economy. But we must have the framework and policies in place and provide this level of accountability. The future of corporate governance. As concerns about situations like climate change, social inequality continue to grow, governments, like many companies, are likely to face increasing pressure to address these issues in their corporate governance practices. This may include greater disclosure and transparency around the environmental and social impact of the company's practices, as well as a greater engagement with all stakeholders on these issues. This also creates a great opportunity for leaders to champion environmental improvements, which I must say I'm very happy that we're doing with our plastic-free campaign. And I'm hoping and trusting, looking at the tables, it doesn't look that way, that we can seek more ways to do so in our day-to-day practices, and it has a direct impact on all of our health. There is an increasing focus on stakeholder engagement as the community increases the demands for greater transparency and accountability, especially in the age of the internet that we now live in. Big difference from the past is that certain things could go undetected for a long time. Right now, whether you have a whistleblower policy in place or not, stuff is shared, leaked, and it's on the internet for the world to see, which has great benefits, but also great risks, because the entire world is then, as the old saying going, seen in your backyard, or seeing where your dirty washing is hanging, before you get an opportunity to even address it. So I think we must also take that into consideration when addressing any type of corporate governance issues, that we do so in a way that is not harmful in the long run to our country. The importance of corporate culture in shaping the government's performance and reputation will continue to be emphasized in the future. The role of the boards, the top management in promoting a strong and good corporate culture that aligns with government's values and mission will be crucial. There is an emphasis on governmental practices to continue increasing regulatory oversight of companies, particularly due to the recent corporate scandals and increased public scrutiny of corporate behavior. This could include greater enforcement of existing laws and regulations and the introduction of new regulations to address these emerging issues. Overall, the future of corporate governance ties into governmental practices by pushing for transparency, accountability, and responsible behavior by government. We should be the trendsetters, as well as a greater engagement with the people of St. Martin, the region, and the kingdom, with a greater focus on the incorporation of sustainable practices. To close, I would like to say that our future corporate governance practices must be rooted in good communication and include, as AI said, my minister, Artwell Arian, did you notice that? Whose focus has been, I must say, in his tenure on innovation. So he is AI himself. He promotes AI, and definitely any corporate governance in the future must take the role that AI has to play into account and ensure that all the protections for all of us are included. Thank you. I wish you a good conference.